Welcome to the Brainy Blonde podcast. You guys, this is a fraught time in my life. I'm hopping on a plane to take my oldest daughter to college in a few days, and that comes with so many mixed emotions, from glowing with pride at what an incredible woman she's become, to wanting to just cancel the whole thing and make her stay home with me. And I've done a really good job, at least in recent years, of not hovering too much, letting my kids make their own mistakes and learning just how strong they are. But that's easier done when they're just down the hallway and I can just jump right in and be mama bear if I have to. And I've learned that life rarely goes as planned. And so often it goes way better than I ever could have dreamed. But in these moments, these big moments, it's hard to let go of the reins. I like to joke that I'm a firstborn, eldest daughter, Virgo, so I was literally born to be a control freak. This is a work in progress. Today, I'm sharing a conversation with someone you're just going to love. She's truly an expert at letting go of what life was supposed to look like and leaning into what it is. Possibly not because she was born that way, but because of an almost too crazy to be true story of what happened to her family 4 years ago. You're going to be so moved by her beautiful storytelling and inspired by her ability to be present even in the most challenging of times. There's a concept that I've been really focusing on lately. That is, if you look to where your pain is, that is where your purpose lies. Laura Dill is the author of the book Daughter, Embracing the Difficult Journey of Caring for a Dying Parent Without Falling Apart, and founder of the Slay Society, a nonprofit organization benefiting caregivers. And not only has she found her purpose, but I imagine you too will be inspired to find yours. Laura, welcome. I am so excited that you're here today. I wanted to start off and say something and like kind of super vulnerable, but like really real. So the last time you and I talked, I thought we were going to get on the phone for 10 minutes. And I think we talked for like 2.5 hours. And honestly, I was thinking about it. Well, I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you today and for you to share your story is also because of how much you've affected me. So we talked about this, but like, I feel like the universe has been conspiring to put us together for 6 years. And I feel like I was kind of like putting my hands up because I have a lot of stuff about being a caregiver, and I'm realizing that now, how much stuff I have about that. And I'll say like casually to people who are going through this, because I talk to a lot of people going through brain cancer diagnoses for themselves or with family members, loved ones, partners. And I say, oh, it's so much easier being the person with it than being a caregiver, because when I took care of my mom, it's like one of the hardest times of my life. So when I talked to you last time, I am not overstating when I feel like you've like kind of changed my life. Like I think about things so much differently. No, for real.
Really?
I talked to my sister about it for a long time because she leans way more into being a caregiver than I do. She's built different, but also she's good at it. Right. And I just wanted to tell you that because I feel like I've been really, I don't know, like have my armor on around that. And I can talk about my story, but like leaning into that space with my mom or witnessing other people caring for their parents is such a trigger for me. And after I talked to you, I felt better. I know I need a lot of work. I know I have a lot of things that I need to do, but you made me feel so much better. And so I'm so glad to be able to talk to you.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you for sharing that. What changed for you? Like what perspective did you walk away with thinking, I can adjust that?
Yeah, I think for me, there's two things. I think one is my own stuff, which is a lot of fear around as a mom, as just a human, about something happening in my brain that makes me not myself anymore. And for me not to be able to share my life or tell my story or live in a way that feels aligned with me. So that's one of them. That's one of my scary things. And I think the other one is when my mom got sick. Um, she had a seizure in the grocery store shopping for Thanksgiving, 2 days before Thanksgiving, and it was 2 weeks before my wedding. My I was 27, and we had a, like, pretty normal life. Like, my parents fell in love
Right.
in high school, they were together, we were just like your average family, and I think looking back, I was used to everything kinda working out, and when it
Right.
got real scary, and then I did step in and I did take care of her for the 18 months that she was with us, but I don't like how I did it. Like, I don't know how she experienced,
Mm.
but now as a 40 something looking back to my 25-year-old selfish self doing it, um, I think I had a lot of resentment. I think I had a lot of fear. I wasn't equipped, and I
Yeah.
wish if I did it over, I'd do it better and I'd do it different. And so witnessing you and what you shared about how you were with your mom, undid something in me a little. I mean, I still am working on how I feel about it because I can't change the past, but that doesn't mean I can't do other stuff better. And because you did it so beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
I think you
welcome.
probably were exactly what your mom needed at that time. And I think as a mom, and for you as a mom, like when I think about my kids, I know that like just knowing my kids who, as you know, are 10, no, 12, 11, and 9, I think I could figure out which ones will show up for me in different ways. But I don't like, I would never think that that means they love me differently. I know I have one that's
Okay.
more nurturing. That doesn't mean she loves me more than the other one, you know? And so
Yeah.
the way you showed up for your mom in your full capacity at all of 27 years old is just what you had to give right at that time. And I think she knows that.
Thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I I I mean, yeah. I think I hold myself to a really high standard and can be a good or a bad thing,
Yeah, it's true.
but yeah, it's one of those, like, you know better, you do better, but that's a big one to mess up and to deal with that in hindsight, you know?
Yeah, without knowing too many details, and you don't have to share them at all. But I don't. I think you think you messed up. I don't really think she thinks you messed up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, I feel like for all of our listeners today who many probably know you, um, but there's probably a lot that don't. So I would love for you to tell your story, your beautiful story,
Mm.
about about your parents and why we're connected.
Well, I struggle usually to do this in a short, concise way. So let me see if I can do a better job of this. But my beautiful story starts with my beautiful parents, and it's funny because I say that about them because they were beautiful people, but they were also, and I think this is important to say, they were real humans. Like they were flawed people who screwed things up and made mistakes and made bad decisions. And I find when we lose people, I'm going off on a tangent, but when we lose people, we tend to romanticize our
Mm,
memory of them. And I think that's a disservice to the people that we loved because we loved them wholly for all their flaws, all their mistakes, right? All their bad choices. Um, but for all intents and purposes, I had a pretty textbook, like loving family life. My parents did divorce when I was younger, when I was in my late teens, but they came back together like so harmoniously for my family. And I have 3 kids, and they showed up at
okay.
all the birthday parties and all the Christmases. So it was nice, coming from a divorce, like a broken home or divorced parents, we always had that feeling of everybody would still come together when they needed to, which was so incredible. And we both, I'm saying we, my brother and I both feel so blessed for that. But in August of 2019, my parents had remarried to other people. My dad's cognitive abilities were quickly declining, and we thought he had dementia. And I think this is pretty standard. We thought there was a lot of short term memories, and there might be a dementia diagnosis. And that summer, he got the whole battery of tests done, all but a brain scan. And so all these tests came back that no, there's no dementia and everything is fine and blood work is great. And then lo and behold, a couple of months into this journey of him continuing to decline, he gets brought to emerge after an episode of full incontinence at my daughter's 7th birthday party. And he's diagnosed with a brain tumor. And this, I mean, you've been there. This absolutely floored me, my brother, my stepmother, even my mom. I remember phoning my mom and sobbing to my mom and saying, Dad has a brain tumor. And that felt so foreign, like coming out of my own mouth. It was so, I don't think I ever in my life thought I would know a human in my circle with a brain tumor, let alone obviously what was going to happen next. So we found out, he did have a resection. It went really well. And then we went to our neurosurgeon after the 13-hour surgery. And we never Googled glioblastoma. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know the prognosis. We just knew that they had told us it looks like it could be glioblastoma, but we won't know for sure until we do the pathology. So they did the resection. We went to him that day. We thought we might have 15 to 20 years left with our dad. Now, my dad was 63. So that might sound like a good, 82 would be a nice age. If you love your parent or anyone in your life you love, 15 to 20 years is never going to feel like enough time. Right? If someone said to you right now, you're going to only have your child for 15 more years, you wouldn't think, well, that's plenty. We'll get lots.
Right.
You just would be crushed, right? So even my dad, I was crushed and my brother was crushed, but we went up to the neurosurgeon after the surgery and we asked, how much time, if the surgery went well, what are we looking at? He said about a year. And we just were gutted by that information. We had no idea it could be anything less than 15 years, which wasn't enough time. And we just fell into heaps. Me, my brother, my stepmom, I don't know what order, but we were all just in this pile on the floor, just heartbroken and sobbing and in shock. And it was awful. So we were just trying to come to terms with that prognosis. And 14 days after the day that they found this brain tumor in my dad was my 37th birthday. And I was home here eating. My dad had come out of the hospital at that point. He'd been home for 4 days recovering from his surgery. And we were here eating ice cream cake in my kitchen. And I had said to my mom, if it's okay with you, Mom, I'm just going to have Dad and his wife come over. And I just want to eat ice cream cake with my dad on my birthday. And can I celebrate with you a different day instead of having everyone come together? And I knew this could be my last birthday with my dad. I hoped it wasn't. It was, but she said, yes, of course. And while we ate that ice cream cake in our kitchen, my mom collapsed of a seizure in her kitchen right at that same moment across the city from where I live, and was rushed to the same emerge department at the same hospital and also diagnosed with brain tumors, which also turned out to be glioblastoma.
What?
Yeah. So we're days into trying to navigate what a world will look like without our dad in it and how to spend that next year making the most of whatever time we're gifted. And now we find out that we're going to have to do the exact same thing with our other parent at exactly the same time. And there is a tremendous amount of conflicting guilt that comes with having both your parents dying at once. Maybe even more so when there's the exact same diagnosis, but maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter. Trying to choose which one to spend time with is awful. And every time I would pick, because they were divorced, I'm going to take care of my mom today, I would feel like I was letting my dad down, and vice versa. So we started this journey of tandem radiation. And I mean, we set them up with the same radiation oncologist, same neuro-oncologist. We had the radiation appointments start on the same day and happen at the same time every day. They had 6 weeks of radiation every day. And we would just meet at the hospital. I took my mom to live with me. She was married to a terribly, unfortunately sick alcoholic. So I took her to live here with me, with my kids and my husband. And my stepmom took beautiful care of my dad. And we arranged everything to happen together. So not a lot of people, daughters can say, or sons, because my brother was there too, that you could sit in a room, in a radiation waiting area and say, okay, Dad, you're up. And then he comes out and you're like, okay, Mom, you're next. And watch your parents go off to their like twin radiation appointments. And then we'd all go out for lunch or have a coffee. It was just the most surreal. I want to say beautiful again, but that sounds a little bit like unbelievable. But it was just the most surreal way to navigate two parents with twin brain tumors going through the exact same journey at the exact same time to their end of their life, which was pretty awful.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, I can't wrap my mind around it. And I can't imagine that there's another story like yours. That's just, it's so rare. And for that to happen at the same time to both your parents, I just, wow.
Hmm. And I think that but their brain tumors were in the same location, measured the same size, and were in the same location of their brains as well. And they were both 63.
You just never hear of that. I mean, people will kind of tiptoe into, I mean, I've tiptoed into the genetics of it because my treatment is genetic and my mom and I both had
Yeah,
it. But your parents are obviously not related. Same within
I
weeks.
hope not.
Um, yeah, I mean, does anyone say anything about what they think and why that happened, or not that it matters, but it begs the question.
No, but it does, right? It does. Yeah, when your mom was diagnosed, I'm sure that the first thing you thought was, well, you go through everything like, oh, maybe she shouldn't have smoked, or what the heck, she never smoked, or maybe she drank too much, or what, she never touched alcohol, or I remember I had 4 miscarriages before I had my 3 children, and I remember thinking I shouldn't have eaten that shrimp at that party. Like, I'm such an idiot. I like, I'm not supposed to eat seafood. Like, just you want to blame something all the
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah,
It's innate. It's our human nature that we want to blame something. So of course I want to blame something, and everybody asks me that question first. That's
yeah,
always the first question: is what do you think caused this? What kind of a coincidence? Because I mean, it's too much of a coincidence to really be a coincidence.
right.
And so there is a bit of a controversial, or I should say, conspiracy theory behind that. We had built a house. I live in Ottawa, Canada, and we had built a house out in the country in 1990. My parents built a house, and my dad, we'd moved out of that house, I think 5 years after building it. In the end, the house was way too big. We couldn't afford that house. Um, but my dad went back to that house, and he knocked on the door of the woman living in the house. And he did this the morning after my mom was diagnosed. And he said to the woman in the house, this is what has happened. And I have this brain tumor, and my ex-wife has this brain tumor. And I remember thinking, Dad, you can't go ruin someone's day by
Right.
telling them that you have a brain tumor from the house, you think, and that your ex-wife has this brain tumor from the house. And sure enough, the woman living in our home was living with a brain tumor, and the neighbor died of a glioblastoma. So
Oh
the
my
woman in our
God.
home, it was just a brain tumor. There was no pathology on it yet, but the neighbor had actually died of a glioblastoma.
Wow.
So we go back to this theory that our government department called National Defense, owned that land and was dumping. There's two theories. One, they were actually apparently allegedly dumping toxic waste into the field, which they've denied. The other is that they've admitted that they used Agent Orange, which is an illegal now banned pesticide, on that field right adjacent from our house, directly across the street in the field from our house. So we don't know. I mean, they have come back and said, yes, we did use Agent Orange, but we tested the soil and everything seemed to be safe. But that was a test done in 1989. A test done in
Oh,
2024
very
would be
different
much different
test.
than a test done in 1989.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, is that something that you feel compelled to pursue or interested in, or is it something you just can kind of compartmentalize and say maybe and put it aside? How do you deal with it?
I I want to keep pursuing it. I think I get in my own head about not knowing how. Like, I get sort of an imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything about this. I would love to find somebody someday, an environmental lawyer who would want to look into this.
Mhm.
I've reached out to Aaron Brockovich. Have not heard back, but I will keep trying.
Yeah.
Um, But I found, for me at that time, my capacity lied in helping other people more, and my skill set more than it really kind of fell into research. And so I became more of a glioblastoma advocate and a caregiver advocate, and I started a charity, and I threw my whole heart and story into a book to help other people. And I think, a lot of people have said, why didn't you go pursue that and chase down what caused these? And ultimately, that's what I would like to do. But it actually, this is being very, I don't think I've ever told anyone this before. It makes me so angry that the world is so hell bent on finding a cure and not a cause. And when I talk to doctors about this, neurosurgeons and neuro-oncologists, and I say, what do you think are the chances? And where should I go pursue this? They have literally said to me, you're never going to figure this out. You're never going to pin the cause. I wouldn't bother wasting my time like barking at that tree. And that's felt really discouraging and, quite
Mm-hmm.
honestly, really disappointing to me. And it's felt like everybody wants to put dollars into product, medication that I think is necessary. No, and I'm also fully aware that I'm saying this to somebody living with glioblastoma. And so there's going to be a very different perspective. So I'm so interested to hear yours. But why are we not putting as much energy into finding a cause that can prevent some of these diagnoses in the first place?
Yeah.
So I think I get resentful and a little bitter, and then I feel like, no, it's safer for my heart to just help the people going through it right now today and their caregivers. So that's what my charity does, is we help the caregivers, we financially support caregivers, and that just seemed like a
Okay.
really productive, healthy, healing way for me to throw my energy.
It does. And maybe that is ultimately what you'll do, and it is certainly healing and certainly helpful. And maybe there's a chapter 2 of this, or a book 2, because I agree with you. I think yeah, first of all, you have to protect your heart, and you're in the thick of it with 3 kids right now, and this might be exactly where you need to be right now. But I do go to trying to find a cure and trying to find, but mine's different because I know the genetics in it, for us. Now, it doesn't mean because you have
Mhm.
the gene that it's
Right.
going to happen. It's just kind of, as we know with the cancer genes that we're starting to discover more and more of, that it just means it could get turned on. An event could turn it on in your body. But mathematically, I mean, I have 4 kids, so my motivating factor is different. It's for the future. But that doesn't mean I'm not fired
Yeah.
up when I hear you talk, because yeah, when my mom got it, oh, don't worry, it's not genetic. There is no known cause, but it's also, to your point, nobody's looking for a cause. And the cause is going to help uncover the cure, and the cause is going to help uncover some of the stuff that I think we both care about, with in terms of our environment and our food and other things that we're just not protected from like we should be.
Mhm. I agree. I find it so fascinating too to talk to you, because I know that you've said to me before that when you were diagnosed, it was almost a relief.
Mhm.
And I just think that's the such a profound perspective, but an unexpected perspective. I know when my parents were diagnosed, the first question we had for the neurosurgeon was, my brother said right to our neurosurgeon, should we be worried? When my dad was diagnosed, he said, should we be worried? Me and my sister. And the neurosurgeon said, no, 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 there's no known genetic factor. And then when my mom was diagnosed 14 days later, and we said to the neurosurgeon, now should we be worried? He said,
Right?
Yes, I'm going to book you an MRI." And that was the most terrifying thing. And I know that you lived with that fear for so long, Rebecca, that I live with it. Every time I said this to somebody today, anytime I have like a floater in my eyes, like I'm tired, or I see like a spot, or I have a headache, even pain in my neck, like stiffness in my neck, or God forbid, I forget something, I
Right.
immediately trigger to, oh my gosh, I have glioblastoma. And that's
And
what you
I
lived, and now that's what you're living. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because yes, I think because for 15 years I lived what you're describing for myself, but
Mhm.
also for my 4 kids. And I was an anxious mom. I remember when I had my firstborn, I was I have my motherhood maternity black dress that I wore to my mom's funeral in April. She died on my sister's birthday, 3 days after her birthday. And I was 6 months pregnant with my firstborn. And I thought I was okay. I focused all my energy on momhood, and I wasn't
Yeah.
okay. I know it now. I wasn't okay. I mean, I couldn't sleep. I had to watch him breathe. I had to have my hand on his chest and make sure he was breathing. I
Yeah.
was a very anxious parent. And I think that, I mean, that really highlights how exhausting anxiety is in any context, but just living with that fear for myself
Yeah.
and for my kids for a decade and a half. I think one was, okay, here it is. This is what been so afraid of. Here it is. And maybe a weird sense of it's happening to me, not them, which doesn't make any logical sense. But like, I got it.
Mhm.
It's okay now. I'm the one. This is what it was going to be.
Yeah.
Okay. And there is no logic to that, but I think that's part of how I feel. Like somehow I saved them because I got.
Well, there is. It's not explainable logic, but you're a mom, and it's just motherhood, and that's just it's just what's built into us as moms.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's and I feel a lot of calm in the big picture about living with this and even about death. Like in general, I feel fine about it. When the MRIs come, I still get stressed. I still get stressed if I get a headache. I mean, but it comes and goes. It's not nearly as consuming as the fear that I
Yeah.
felt between my mom and me. It's so different.
Were you with your mom when she passed?
I wasn't. She was with my dad.
Do you think that watching her journey of getting closer through death and dying made you more comfortable or prepared, or not prepared, but peaceful at the idea of your own dying journey?
No, I don't, not at all. My experience with my mom, I almost feel like I'm an entirely different person than I was. My mom had a biopsy a couple of days. I don't know how many days now. It's been a long time. It's been 20 years. But after
Mhm.
after the MRI to determine that it was glioblastoma. And after that, she was never the same. The only way I can describe it is it's like somebody with severe Alzheimer's. So you have to understand she was a vibrant, like she was horseback riding. She went to the grocery store. She just turned 50. Like she's not that much older than I am now. Right. So, and then she went to like within a matter of days to, to somebody totally different. So my
Yeah.
experience in taking care of her was taking care of my mom and taking care of a stranger kind of wrapped up into one. So watching her go was so different because she went a year and a half before she went. Her body lived on and was healthy for a really
Right.
long time after her mind went. So it was very, very different. My experience with my death feels a lot more spiritual. And it's weird because I really moved away from a
Mhm.
lot of spirituality for a long time, which is a story for another day. But yeah, it was very much a spiritual God thing that I feel completely held and cared for
Mm.
and safe. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that means I'm going to live or not, but I know that I'm good. Whatever I'm doing is the right thing. And I feel that very, very deeply now. I never felt that way before. Not since I was a little kid.
That sounds incredibly comforting to me.
Yeah, it's very comforting. It's a way better. I mean, that's why I say cancer saved my life. I mean, I believe it so much. I live
Mhm.
life so much differently. I'm so much happier. I love being a mom. I mean, I wish I could have those years back. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that, but where I was so anxious because,
Right.
I missed them a little bit those years because of the way I was living. And now it's just, I love it. I mean, I'm not trying to act like I live in some little paradise land, but I mean, all day I feel grateful. I do.
Yeah.
I would love for you to
Oh, that's
talk
amazing.
about your book. Yeah.
My book was something that I never thought in my life I would have. First off, let's make that very clear. I was diagnosed at 13 with a reading disability. I'm sure I have some dyslexia that's never been diagnosed. I failed grade 12 English. Like there was no way that writing a book was on my path. Like I would not, if you told me the day my parents even got diagnosed, knowing I was living this insane journey, that I would have a book, I would have been like, absolutely not. You are losing your mind. But my dad loved to write. And I actually think this is a funny story. When my parents, we can keep it or not, but when my parents divorced, my dad would sit around the house pining. Like, he did not want this divorce. My mom did. I was 17, and I think she was like, and God love both my parents, but I think my mom was like, I've tried. Like, we've done the therapy. I've held on to no, like, this is it. Like, and they were so amicable in their separation. They were very amicable. I have one brother, with him and we both lived with one parent for a while. I mean, we really, like, they could not have nailed that any better. They did it beautifully. But ultimately, she's the one who left. She even said to my dad, his name was Jerry, she said, Jerry, you keep the house. I'm the one that wants to go. You keep the house. There was no cheating. There was no lying. There was nothing, it was just like this nice, I've never seen two people divorce in a more amazing way. They should have won an award. So anyway, um, yeah, it was pretty incredible. But my dad was like sad and lonely for a really long time, and my brother and I were 17, 18, and maybe pushing 19, and maybe underage drinking. We're Canadian, so our drinking age is a little lower than yours.
Okay.
And my dad just wanted to go to the bar all the time and sit at the bar and try to meet girls, meet women. And I said, you're not going to meet anyone at the bar. So you're going to have to like figure something else out. So one day he's an accountant. My dad is an accountant. Like, there's no like more black and white job than accounting. And he says, I'm going to go take a creative writing class. And I thought he was like having an absolute midlife crisis. Like, why? Like, I think you're colorblind. Like, there's not a creative bone in your body. And so he went and took this creative writing class, and who knew that somewhere down deep in, lodged in my dad was this desire to write. And he wrote 3 books over the next few years. He wrote 3 books,
Yeah.
but he never published. Yeah. He actually wrote 3 books, and they were all like science fiction. He did a ton of short stories. He wrote a beautiful short story about my daughter the day she was born, because he was in the room for all 3 of my children being born. My dad was in the room, and he stood behind me, but he was in the room. And so he wrote short stories, and he wrote these 3 novels. And when he got sick, he wasn't able to write anymore and cohesively put a thought together that would make sense, let alone then like type it out. Right at the end, my dad lived 7 months with his glioblastoma.
Wow.
So
Okay.
towards the end, we thought we had a lot more time. He ended up acutely contracting an infection in the incision, and the infection got too deep into the ventricles of his brain, and that's actually how my dad passed away. But it was unexpected. And so, what ultimately ended up being his deathbed in the hospital. One day I went to visit him, and we thought he'd be getting an antiseptic wash. My dad had 6 brain surgeries in 7
Oh
months.
my God.
And we thought he'd just get this brain surgery and they'd wash out the infection and he'd go home. And he never ended up going home. But he said to me in the hospital, Laura, I can see that you can write. And all I was doing was sharing our story on social media. Like, that's all. I was not writing. I wasn't trying to write. I was just sharing on social media. But my dad said, you can really emote really well, and you write so creatively. And he didn't know I had it in me, and I didn't know I had it in me, and I still didn't believe it at the time. And he said, when I get out of here, we're going to write a book together. And I was like, what I would write and what you would write are probably very different. He really liked sci-fi. And died. He ended up passing away, and he didn't get out of the hospital. But I decided to write the book that I would have wanted to write anyway, with him spiritually beside me. And I put his ashes in a little pendant, and I wore those every time I'd sit to write, and I'd light a candle. Someone had made me these candles with my parents' faces on them, and I'd light one of those candles. I would take both my parents on my writing journey, and, and I would wear like his bracelets, and I would just do anything I could to bring my dad in and around me, and my mom in the background. And I wrote this book, and so much of my book just flowed through me. Like, it really felt like I was in this, not to get really woo-woo, but it felt like I was in this really intense state of just flow.
Yep.
And I would start writing, and I would just write and write and write. And I still feel like that when I write anything now. And I just feel like that was my dad being right there with me, and ultimately writing this book together. just not being here beside me for it.
I have a feeling that you do have more books in you, just like the little things that I've read that you've written. It's hard for me to believe that you weren't like a great student. I laugh because I always thought I was going to be a writer growing up. I was an English lit major.
No
I
way.
wrote a mom blog. I mean, I just like that was one of my things that I was going to do. I was going to be a writer. And but I always said
You
people
are a
always
great
say
writer.
well, thanks. I always said people say write what you know, and I have the most boring cliche life. That's what I always would say growing up. And now I feel like I don't have a very boring cliche life, but I don't have any idea how to
No.
write. So I admire you so much. And maybe someday that'll come back to me. I don't have the flow at all right now.
Well, it's true. Like they say, write what you know, and it's so true. And I, maybe I'm an expert in gardening. That's my background is horticulture, but otherwise, I just had to trust that I was an expert in this, in caregiving, specifically for a parent, because, and as have you, I did it and I survived it. And I felt like not only did I do it once, I did it twice. I did it, at the exact same time. I've done it a third time. But we'll get to that in a minute. But I felt like I came out of the journey better than I had gone into it. And so I had to really work backwards and dig really deep to bring myself back to the day of the diagnosis for my dad and to think, how do I meet somebody else now where they're at on that first day and try to guide them from that place as opposed to guiding them from where I am now because there's such a
Oh,
difference there. And so I really had to kind of work backwards to like, what did I do? Like, what did I tangibly do day to day to get myself through those days? And especially on the days where I just felt like I couldn't get off the floor, especially if I didn't willingly hit the floor. Sometimes I just collapse onto the floor in tears or in panic attacks and trying to breathe. And I, yeah, it was a healing journey to go back and do that. It was very triggering, and very exhausting those few months that I spent writing. But I think it helped me process so much of what I went through. And I just feel like I figured it out. I figured out a system. I figured out a way to show up for them every day. I just thought that's what everybody did. But you and I just talked about this earlier. Not everybody, I guess, does that and has that ability to do that and is blessed with that gift right in that moment. And I don't have any regrets at all. And that was always the most important thing to me was how am I going to do this and have no regrets at the end? And when people would say things to me that I know you've heard, Rebecca, like, you really need to take time for yourself, Laura. And you should go take a day away from the hospital. Your dad will be fine, or your mom won't even notice. And likely she wouldn't have, but I'd notice. And if
yeah.
I went and sat at a Scandinavian spa for the day, I would have hated every second of it because my heart wanted to be in that stupid, dingy, yellow hospital room feeding my mother with a spoon. Like, I wanted to be there with her every day. And taking myself out of that, while I would only have that for maybe a year, maybe a little more, maybe less, wasn't a gift to me to have a break. It wasn't a gift to me
Right.
at all. That was horrible.
Right.
I just wanted to be there. And yeah, and I got the opportunity. A lot of people say, like, I don't know how you survive that, but I don't know how you survive losing someone suddenly to a heart attack or a motor vehicle accident. I feel like it was very hard, as you know, to watch your parent quickly not, become not your parent, like become a
Right.
whole different person and personality. B, then to watch their light slowly go out, right, over a year or whatever it is. But I got to sit beside my parents' hospital beds and read them letters I'd written them and cry and tell them what great parents they'd been and all the gifts they'd given me and the things they'd taught me and the things I was so mad at them for. And I got to say, like, you assholes and your stupid divorce, like, that was shit.
Oh,
And I just, I got to say and do all the things. And
and not only
not
did you
everyone
get
gets to
to,
do
but
that.
you,
So I think that's pretty.
yeah. Well, I was just say that I mean, not only did you get to do it, but you did do it. I mean, and that's two very distinct things. I mean, I think that thinking about doing it or the
Mhm.
wanting to do it and then actually taking that next step and doing it, which is obviously underscores how wonderful you are, but also that the relationship you had with your parents, that they could take that. I don't know. I love that story because it's you can't go back and redo it. But when you were fully aware and you knew what you wanted to do and how you wanted to do it, you didn't let anyone pull you off course and you weren't distracted from it and you got
Mm-hmm.
to do it that way. And do you feel like when you were writing the book, and this is the one it's like hard for me to imagine, but I was listening to a podcast a couple days ago about going into the pain instead of stopping the
Mm-hmm.
pain. It really the pain isn't
Right.
something to avoid. It's something really to lean into. And that's where you're really meant to be. That's where your purpose is in the pain. And I think I spent the years in fear and avoiding the pain of what if, and then I was okay with me getting cancer. And then the pain that I haven't revisited is the pain of losing my mom. And so when I hear you saying that you went back to that first day when you were, I mean, I remember opening my car door and collapsing in the middle of Lincoln Avenue in Chicago.
Yeah.
And because I was called, the police had called me, because she had passed out in the grocery store. And I don't talk about that. I don't think about that. I mean, it's barely okay for me to think about it right now. I just kind of want to push it away. Like, I don't want to think about that time. But you're
Don't push it
encouraging me
away.
to do that. Yeah. And the fact that
Mm.
you were able to do it, was it ultimately pretty healing and therapeutic for you? Did it, to be able to go back and do that?
Yeah, it was. It really was. And I'm not sure I have a magic piece of advice on how to do it, but a friend of mine at one point said to me, and she's got a social worker background, and she said, you are insanely good at processing things in the moment as they happen to you. And I've always been really good, and maybe this is part of it. I know you do a lot of meditation. I've always been very good at just, I've never meditated, being very present in the moment. Could be the fact that I hyper focus on things. I don't know, but I'm good at just being like right here and tuning everything out. And so when I sat with my parents, I didn't sit on my phone. Like, I sat with my parent and I looked at them and I stared at them and I studied their faces and I said the words and I cried. And I just knew, this is going to be so hard to say and read. I remember writing a letter to my dad all about his hands and how I'll miss his hands and how his hands helped me grow up, from like holding me as a baby to holding my bike handles straight to, all the things. It was just this really beautiful exercise for me. My dad maybe didn't care at all. Maybe he thought it was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. But for my soul, it was so helpful to like write that. And I did the same thing for my mom. And I remember, reading it to them and just like dry heaving my way through it. Like, it was not an eloquent reading of a letter at all. But I knew, like, if I can do it, it'll be out there for them, and then they can take it with them when they leave this world. But going back later and reliving it all, it was really difficult. It was more tiring. It was exhausting. And it
Yeah.
was confusing because now I wasn't a caregiver anymore, which is confusing, in an identity crisis kind of way. And I just felt like, what excuse do I have? Like, my parents are gone. Like, now I'm grieving. I shouldn't be this tired or angry. But it kind of took a really hard year, and it added another hard year on the back because I wrote the book of a year after my parents had both died. And I sort of let myself just wallow, I guess, in that year. And I shouldn't say wallow because I took that pain and I put it into a book. And that's certainly not wallowing, but
No.
I let myself just be in it. And
Yeah.
I let myself continue to say to people, like, I'm just sitting in it. And, can you bring me a pizza? Or can someone drop off a bottle of wine? Or I would post my crying, sobbing face to my 13-year-old daughter's horror. I would post myself crying on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, and just say, like, this is just really real, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to give a voice to other people grieving people that they've lost, because there is no time at which you should be over it or moving on, or, oh God, Laura, that was a whole year ago. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard to do. I am so grateful that I got to do it.
Yeah. And it goes without saying, but the book that you wrote is to help other people. So there's that element too, because you're actually, I mean, your daughter,
Yeah.
your book
Yeah.
daughter is actually kind of a guide through the caregiving process. for others.
Yeah. That's literally what I wanted to create was I could write a memoir and tell my story, and that would be great. Like, I have a story, and you have a story, and there's so many people. Everybody has a story. We could all write a book about our story. But how can I take that story and have it help people in, like, really, like I mentioned, these very tangible things? What did I tangibly do to get myself through that day every single day? And what little lessons, actually, I think this was so amazing that I had the opportunity to do this. I got to write my parents' story through my story. I got to write their legacy, right? I got to, like, leave my dad out there in this world and leave my mom. And so not only did my parents get to raise two kids and hopefully feel like, hey, we did okay, because our
Yeah.
daughter is doing this and our son is doing this and they're contributing members of society and they're loving and blah, blah, blah. Now all their little parenting lessons are, like, out there for other people, like, having ripple effects that they have no idea are going on far past their time on this earth. And that just makes me so excited to think that all those lessons my dad taught me on the soccer field as my soccer coach for 9 years, like, they're in a book and people are reading them. And then they're applying them to their caregiving journey for people with the same disease my dad had. Like, how cool is that? And for my mom too, you worry as a mom every day that you're screwing your kids up. God knows I do.
Right.
And I just hope that I hope my mom now looks down at us and thinks like, "Oh, I didn't screw them up. Like, I did okay. I did okay. I did great. I was perfect and I was whole and I was exactly who I needed to be as a mom." And other people are going to benefit from that, not just Laura.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's amazing. That is kind of the end all be all, right? Like, yeah, full circle. And
Yeah.
what about being a mom yourself and your kiddos? How's that
Oh, I
kind of
screw
going
them
for
up every
everybody
day.
else? Well, yeah, we all do. Like that's a side note. But aren't they so proud of you? I mean, that's just amazing.
I think they are. I really do. They were so little when this happened. They were 8, 7, and 5.
Okay.
Um, and I wish they had bigger, brighter, more vivid memories of my parents. But my 11-year-old daughter, she's about to be 12. She went to bed the other night. My parents died 4 years ago,
Okay.
4 and 3.5 years ago. And my daughter said, she was crying and she said, actually, and this is really amazing. She said, Mommy, what did she ask me? What do you regret most about time with your mom and dad? And I said, actually, Ryan, nothing. I don't have regrets. So what do you regret the most? And she said, I regret that I didn't go camping with Grandpa more and that I didn't sew with Granny more. My mom loved to sew. She was a beautiful seamstress. And I thought, like, I was heartbroken for her, but I also thought, like, she's 11 and, almost 4 years later, and she's crying over memories of them from 4 years ago. The fact that she has memories that nice, that warm, that real to hold on to, even though she was only 8 when they passed away, I'm really grateful for that. So it's been interesting to watch my kids go through, one grandparent loss, two grandparent losses. And what we haven't talked about is that
Yes.
in March of last year, my father-in-law, my husband's father was also diagnosed with glioblastoma out of nowhere. And I remember the day that my husband said, my dad's in the hospital, and he named some symptoms, and I said, it sounds like he's had a stroke. And my husband said, no, Laura, I think he has a brain tumor. And I almost laughed in my husband's face, and I said, there's no way he has a brain tumor. It isn't statistically possible. It's not
Right.
even statistically possible for my parents to both have had glioblastoma. It cannot be the case that your dad does too. And sure enough, he was right. And my father-in-law was also diagnosed with glioblastoma, and he passed away 10 months later. Just this past January of 2024, he died. And so my kids have lost 3 grandparents within 3 years. And, they're 12 and under, and they have 1 grandparent left. And that's been really, really hard for them.
Yeah.
But the fact that they've got, you know, they've they've grown into, and they are growing into, just the most empathetic little people. They have so much empathy. They're constantly trying to entrepreneurially sell things, and, like, their entrepreneurialism is impressive. They're always creating things to sell, but they're always donating it. They'll keep some for themselves, but they're always kind of on this, like, very philanthropic quest to do nice things for other people and to help other people. And that's been just really rewarding as a parent to see that.
And what a legacy, for your parents. I mean, obviously, this is trickling down through all of you. And I think so many of us are in that, what do they call it? Like the sandwich generation where we're taking care of our kids and our parents at the
Yeah.
same time. But you had it way too soon. I had it
Yeah.
way too soon. And trying to figure out how to do that
As did you.
simultaneously. Yeah, it's just, it's
Mm,
too much, but I think that's the part that I see with my kiddos too, is I feel like in a lot of ways they're too old for their friends. They're too wise. They're more fully human. They don't have time for the
yeah.
BS of certainly middle school. They're not perfect. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that, but their hearts are more fully formed and they're very compassionate and empathetic. And in the short term, sometimes I worry for them. But as they're getting older, I'm like, dang, these are some amazing humans, and there is good coming out of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I want to just add the Slay Society and what we do,
Yes,
because I
please.
feel like that's a resource for so many people. Hopefully it's a resource for so many people. And then hopefully it doesn't need to be a resource for very many people at all. But the Slay Society is my charity that I started in 2020. And my parents were actually still alive when I started this. But the reason behind it, because I think it's really very nice story, is that people, when my parents were diagnosed, so many strangers showed up for me and my husband and my kids, and and in turn, my mother-in-law, or sorry, my stepmom, my stepdad, and my brother. Um, but it's because our story had a lot of traction, and
Yeah.
by nature, it was so eye-catching or ear-catching. And so people would start dropping off food and gift cards. And I swear for months, every day I would come home, there'd be another little gift bag hanging on my front door with gift cards in it. And they were usually anonymous or might have had a really beautiful little handwritten note, but never expected, never asked for. And for about 6 months, my husband and I, like, we promised we didn't pay for gas and we didn't pay for groceries. And that's a huge thing when you have 3 little kids. You've stopped all of your jobs in order to
Yeah.
walk your parents to the end of their lives without regrets, right? And I was very hell bent on doing that. I'm not going to work, because if I work and I don't spend the time I have with them, I will regret. And I can't live with the regrets after, because I have to live here without them. I'm not going to live here without them and a bunch of I wish I had. And so now we just live in in financial stress instead, but
Uh-huh.
that'll get fixed someday. But I wanted to make sure that other people got to do the same thing, and it was only because people showed up for us and fundraised money for us and gave us food and bought us groceries and paid for our gas that I was able to spend that time reading letters to my dad or reading a book to my mom or playing music with them, instead of being at work wishing I was at a hospital. Like, I got to be there every day. I got to say no to the spa. I got to say no to the self-care, because I actually got to show up every day. But I would not have been able to do that if people hadn't helped. So I wanted to gift that to other people, because I know how precious that time is. And so I started the Slay Society, and we started raising money for glioblastoma caregivers. And I felt that, and Rebecca, being a glioblastoma caregiver at one point with your mom, like there's a lot that you give up, and it's a hard journey, and you're already often in grief, right? When the person
Right.
right in front of you has already changed into somebody else. And I wanted that to be a really sacred space for GBM caregivers over other cancers. So I didn't want this to just encompass all caregivers, but GBM specifically. So we run weekly support groups, glioblastoma caregiver support groups for free, virtually. We also run a grief and loss from GBM support group every week. And then we raise financial assistance that we gift to caregivers of glioblastoma patients to allow them more time to sit with their parent, their sister, their mom, their whoever, and just be there and be present and not have to be worrying about working or fitting this into a schedule. And I think that that's so important.
So important. And I'm so glad you told me all. I didn't know that it was specifically for glioblastoma caregivers, nor did I know that you started it while your
Mhm.
parents were still with you, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
held my first, I held my first fundraiser in the pandemic, and it was gonna be at the end of March of 2020, and my dad would then die on April 11th, so I didn't know he would die so shortly after, but I said, "Dad, I'm gonna do this fundraiser. I'm gonna have an online auction," and this is at the end of February, early March. "I'm gonna have this at the end of March," and he's like, "Okay," and he was again, he was on his deathbed, essentially. And then on March 13th, 2020, the whole world shut down. And everyone said to me, "Well, I guess you have to cancel your online auction." And I said, "No." And
yeah,
everyone
why?
said, "Well, Laura, you can't go ask people for money." Yeah. You can't go start asking businesses for money and donations when they're shutting their doors. And I was like, then they can say no, like, watch me. So I thought my goal was to raise $250 for this one girl who was flying back and forth across the country as an only child to take care of her dad who was dying with glioblastoma in the same hospital my dad was in, actually. And I met her one day at the hospital and I said, "I'd really like to do this for you. And I'm going to do this online auction. And my goal is to raise $250." And it is a pandemic. So I'm hoping we get there. And we raised $4,500 with this one online auction. And and we gave her the whole $4,500, and she got to fly from Calgary to Ottawa several times on that money and be here in Ottawa presently with her dad when he died, the moment he took his last breath. And she wouldn't have otherwise been able to do that. And that was just, like, I have goosebumps just sharing that. That's what sort of became the catalyst. I thought, if I can do that in a global pandemic with businesses shutting their doors, imagine what I could do outside of that. So
You're
we
amazing.
registered a charity here in Canada, and we've raised over $200,000. Thank you. And it's all going back to glioblastoma caregivers.
That's incredible. Oh my God, that's incredible. I'm so inspired. I'm just
Thank
like,
you.
okay, what am I gonna do next? You're so inspiring. Oh my gosh.
You're doing it. You're already doing it.
A little bit. Just getting started. Well,
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me come and do this and share. And hopefully it inspires, other people listening or watching. And, we can do this. Like, this is a hard journey, but we can do this journey.